Sunset Sound was started by my father about 1960-61. I was basically a little boy then, but I do remember the beginnings of the studio, which was completely related to him starting the studio for doing all the Disney work, because he got the contract from Walt Disney to start the Walt Disney Record Company. So he needed a studio to do his work in, and this is how Sunset Sound came to be. So for the first several years here, we only did Disney work. Basically soundtracks, children's records, I think some of the park rides. So after the Disney work, we started getting in outside acts. Our first client was Herb Alpert. First next big clientele that was in here was Elektra Records. And that would be Paul Rothchild producing many acts. So one of the first acts he brought in here was this unknown band named The Doors. And we did The Doors' first record, I think it was like in the fall of '66. And then he went on to do most of the other records after that, all the way to Parts of LA Woman here. And along with that, he did a lot of the other Elektra acts, which were things like Janis Joplin. We did her last record here before she passed away. She actually passed away on the day that they were going to do the playback for the record. But along those lines, at the time, which I can't recall, but a lot of the other Elektra acts were done here. Then I guess we would be moving more into the late 60s, and we were doing bands like Buffalo Springfield. We were getting a lot of acts in town. We were doing Beach Boys. They did some of the Pet Sounds record in here. So rounding out the 60s that I can recall, some of the other acts we did towards the end of that decade were Three Dog Night. Let's see, James Taylor. We did the first James Taylor record that was released here in the States. Some of the more oddball things we did was we did the Monster Mash here. Bobby Boris Pickett, that's always played at Halloween. Very popular tune. Anyway, I think that's probably rounding out the 60s. And now we're going into the 70s. So the 70s... the 70s is kind of a new era here. We started to do a lot of Warner Brothers acts back in the 70s. So that would be Little Feat, that would be Earth, Wind and Fire, a lot of Jackson Browne records, which again was Elektra. We did the Van Halen records. We did Van Halen 1 through 5 here before Eddie opened up his own studio at his house, and those were pretty legendary records. A lot of them were done in this room here, Studio 2. They kind of switched back from Studio 1 and Studio 2. But, and those were all Ted Templeman productions with Don Landy engineering at the time. Let's see what else was in the 70s. Oh, we had Led Zeppelin in here. So we did, first Led Zeppelin record we did was Led Zeppelin 2. And they came in to the Studio 2 here, when we had this English board, a sound techniques board. And they worked on A Whole Lot of Love, and they cut that track in here, from my understanding. And they did various overdubs on that record. And that was basically when they were in town touring and playing the Forum. They would come in and they'd be in town for a couple weeks, and they'd come in and work at Sunset Sound. Next time they came back was, I think, in 1973 or 4, when they did Led Zeppelin 4. And parts of that record were done in Studio 2 here. So they mixed a Stairway to Heaven mix in here, which is now available on this reissue record that they just put out. That was not the version that was originally released, but it's very close. They did mix When the Levee Breaks, and that was done in here, and that is the original version. Some of the other acts that were legendary for the 70s would be the Ringo sessions. Those were done with Bill Schnee engineering and Richard Perry producing. and that was Goodnight Vienna, and then the first Ringo record. So the first Ringo record that was done here, that was literally a Beatles record. That had George Harrison on it. It had John Lennon on it. It had Harry Nilsson on it. It had Billy Preston on it. I think Klaus Vormann was on it. Anyway, it was pretty legendary. So transitioning out of the 70s here at Sunset Sound into what I guess we can call the big 80s. That was a very busy time here, and that's basically when we had 3 full studios running tracking rooms. That's when that came to be here at Sunset Sound. Did a lot of Elton John work here. After Elton, we did Toto. I remember in 1984 they were working on Toto 4, and I remember Jeff coming to me saying the records, after it was finished, he said the record is going to #1 in Billboard next week, and he was so excited because that was the only time they ever got a #1 record, but it was their biggest record. So it was very, very good time thinking about that. And then we have our Warner Brothers act, Prince. He came in here and basically camped out for 9 years. He did all his major records in this facility in Studio 3. He did 1999, he did Little Red Corvette, he did Purple Rain, he did countless other records that never even have been released yet, apparently are still on the shelves, but he probably did something like 25 to 30 albums here, and a lot of them are still yet to be released. But he was an incredible client, and mostly worked in Studio 3. But the 80s were a big time here, and these are just a sliver, a portion of the guys that were in here. But it was quite a special time. So speaking of the philosophy here at Sunset Sound that I learned at a very early age from my father, I think he had basically 3 aspects that he tried to have the studio abide by or live up to. And one was a great level of sonic quality for the equipment, in the sense that if we couldn't purchase the equipment that had the best sonic quality, we built it. And for many years we built our own consoles here, which was kind of unheard of at the time. Some people were doing it, but we went to great lengths to do that for all the rooms. And for many years we had our own custom consoles in each one of the rooms. This being the only room that does not have a custom built console in it currently at this time, which it's a Neve 8088, which is a very rare board because of its size. That was factory built. But the second thing that I think my father always put a lot of the emphasis on for the studio and its philosophy was maintenance. We always had a great maintenance staff, because being a musician and a performer himself, he always felt that there's nothing more annoying than having a session and it breaks down and all the musicians are waiting, or the string players or whatever, and they can't get their work done because there's a glitch or there's a problem with the studio. So we've always had a great maintenance staff here at Sunset Sound. Been very fortunate to have that, and really to keep the studio running when it needed to run and not break down. And I think the third thing that he always impressed upon me was, again, probably from being a musician, was when someone was working in the studios, that they're in there for a reason. They're in there to create, and they don't want to be bothered. So it was always a thing of, all the clients need privacy, and we were never a studio that ever barged in on people or popped in to see what they were doing. In other words, when they were in the studio, that was their place, and that was their place for creativity. And I think that comes from his background, and we tried to convey that and keep that going for all these years. So that's Sunset Sound in a nutshell.